Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Kicking It with Zain. It's me, Zain, the belt guy. There's that belt that's nice and shiny and hanging right there. Just a little bit of background for you. But we're going to get right into this because I got a really busy guest today that, to be honest, I don't even know. So we're going to get to know him a little bit, figure it all out, and I'll tell the origin story of why I even reached out to Ryan. So let's go ahead and bring Ryan and let him tell his story because I sure don't know it.
What's up, man?
What's going on, man? How you doing?
I got a question first. What's the story behind the belt?
Nothing, man. I mean, I got into doing the whole podcasting content thing, and I was like, well, how do you stick out, right? Everyone needs something from marketing, more or less, especially if you're kind of in it and you're new. I had nothing to go off of, so I was like, you know what? I love wrestling. I've always wanted this thing in my head. I've always wanted this thing. So I actually went deep diving enough into the internet and found a supplier that did things and just had this thing made. And that's really it. Just really my love of wrestling meets Giants. So I was like, why not do that? So the belt is actually, has all the Super Bowl plates on it. It's got all the information of, when they were established, all that. So that's really the story behind it. It's kind of like semi-marketing / life fun passion between wrestling and that.
A belt's always a fire piece of merch too.
There's cool.
Just something cool about how you can throw it up over the shoulder.
That's
it's funny. I was never really a wrestling guy, but always respected a belt in terms of a trophy. But a little bit about me. I mean, I feel like kind of I'm on the fringe of Giants social media space. And you're in the thick of it, and that's probably how we cross paths. But, I come from more of the gambling background, host a gambling podcast called the Sports Gambling Podcast. And, we've been doing it since 2011, back when gambling was mostly just shady and meeting a guy named Tony off of Route 22 at a McDonald's on a Wednesday night to settle up. And so, we got started back when it was a niche, and just been kind of grinding along ever since. Podcasting is one of those arts where really the most important thing is consistency and just doing it and never stopping. And so that's where we're at. 1,700 episodes later, we're still talking about sports gambling. We've launched a full company, Sports Gambling Podcast Network. We have over 35 podcast feeds covering every sport from ultimate frisbee to basketball, baseball, college sports, all the way down. So thanks for having me again.
I appreciate you making the time. So you are, and shout out to Darius and Chris and everybody who comes by and is in here. I'll shout you out in the comments. Keep your questions going. Get to know Ryan as I get to know him. Right? It's a community thing here. It's more for people to get to know Ryan in the space more than anything else. So I reached out to Ryan at some point. I would like to say last year. I could be wrong, or maybe earlier this year. And it was really based on, I'm on Twitter, and Ryan and I followed each other probably based off of either, like you said, some mutual Giant stuff, or maybe even some mutual, gambling tweets or something of that nature. I don't know. But we did follow each other. And I saw a clip, and I'm going through my feed, and there was this guy sitting there. It was a panel of 3 individuals. And Ryan's one of the people on this panel whom I didn't know. And I was like, let me just watch the clip. I'm watching the clip. And the only thing I could focus in on is when the camera goes to Ryan, the guy's wearing a blazer. So I'm like, maybe he's wearing a suit, but he's wearing a Giants t-shirt. And I was like, I even put I'd have to go back in my history. If I find the comment, I commented on that. I literally commented on that. That's exactly what he was wearing. Just like that. Yeah. He had his blazer on. No lie. Just like that, and he had the Giants shirt, and I was like, I need to meet this individual. There's some professional video done here in some type of conversation, and is wearing a blazer with a Giants shirt. That screams to me. I was like, I want to meet this guy.
So
I think that's based off of that sole interaction of that clip I saw.
That's funny. It's fun, they tell you, right? Like the best way to find a new audience is create something bite-sized for someone new to kind of test you out with. And it's funny, man, the story of the blazer, we fortunate enough to start having opportunities to go out to Vegas and do shows, and kind of you're in a bright light studio, wherever it is. And I always was like, you know what? The easiest way to be respected and not treated like an asshole, excuse my language, is throw a jacket on. So I'm in Vegas. If you ever saw me in Vegas, jeans and a t-shirt kind of guy, shorts and a t-shirt. But the second I have something some business like to do, just throw the jacket on. It's a Vegas hack too, because you just throw it in the bag, And all of a sudden, you got something for dinner. You got something for the club. You got wherever you're going, you got it. And for me, it generally looks like this with a Giants t-shirt underneath.
And I thought that was the coolest thing ever, man. And I was like, I got to get this guy on. And I actually learned that blazer hack a little bit. I would say a few years ago, maybe 5, 6 years ago. I had a boss, and I worked in consulting, and I was like, I hate going to customer on sites simply because I have to dress a certain way of professionalism. He's like, no, man, just throw on a blazer. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, look at me, I'm wearing jeans. He's like, use a blazer, it'll fix everything. And after that, I was just like, okay, I'm gonna start doing that. But it's true. A blazer is probably one of the most unique, multifaceted pieces of things you can own to use. So shout out to everyone who knows this hack or this lifestyle trick, if you will. So shout out to them. But let's talk a little bit about you. You said 5 o'clock or five, so you're in Cali. Is this correct? You're a West Coast guy.
Yeah,
All right,
Los
so
Angeles.
you're still doing. How did you end up in LA? Are you an East Coast guy? Because I heard you mention Route 22, so you know something about Jersey. So
Yeah,
how did
no,
you get to LA?
yeah, and our show is he's a Philly, my co-host a Philly guy. I'm a quote New York guy. Grew up in Jersey. Grew
Okay.
up in a town called Fanwood, New Jersey. So grew up that's how I became a Giants fan, obviously. But the second that high school ended, I kind of wanted out. So I went to school down at Virginia Tech. Really was craving like some sort of big campus vibe with a football team.
Sure,
That's where I
sure.
landed, and from there, kind of dumb luck. My senior year had a roommate who was going to be moving out to California to live with his brother, and I said, "Yeah, that sounds great. Let's go." And so we just kind of didn't have a plan, didn't have a job, headed out to California. Knew I wanted to hang out somewhere near the beach, and that led me into like a decently long career in technology, working like IT type jobs. And
Nice.
like I said, the podcast was a hobby for a long time, and so now at the end of a cool kind of keep grinding story. This is the full time thing now. I'm sitting in a studio in Eagle Rock, California, not too far from the Rose Bowl, and this is where we go live 5 days a week.
Nice, nice. So where is Fanwood? I don't know if I've heard of that.
Scotch Plain, Union County. So
Okay, gotcha.
next to Plainfield.
Gotcha.
Went to high school at Scotch Plains Fanwood High School. Shout out to the Raiders.
Nice, nice, nice. Okay. So born and raised in Jersey. Giants thing a family thing or a geographical thing? Parents were a
Yeah.
review thing.
I'll never forget, but my uncle, I feel like it was my uncle. I credit my uncle with this, but he used to say the Mets, Jets, and Nets all suck. And so that's it was like, all right, I guess we're Giants fans. Grew up. It was great in the beginning. I was a child of the '80s, so coming into my sportsdom, I was watching them win Super Bowls, and then
Or
bang, get hit right in the face with Ray Must Go and those Ray Handley years, and just some really bad Giants teams. And so yeah, that was the beginning. And honestly, growing up, it was like we were probably more of a Yankees and Knicks household. So it's kind of funny that now I sit here as like primarily a football fan.
yeah. So who was your favorite? What was it about football that just kind of got to you later? I should say. You're saying primarily Yankees, Knicks. That's probably going in the house. What brought you back to this? Was it really kind of the profession as well, where the gambling world intersects? Because we know gambling in football took off at one point, probably a lot because of fantasy football. That probably pushed a lot of it.
Yeah, I think it was that. I think I was early into fantasy football. I can remember in college, so 2000 probably, like playing fantasy football, and then remembering when Yahoo blew up, and all of that certainly helped. But also, as a kid from Jersey, you were always gambling on football, and there was something even when football wasn't like a priority for me. There was something always social about football, like watching it with friends or like gatherings or whatever it was. Where as I got older, that became the hang, right? We would Sundays were the day that people would come by. Being on the West Coast, back in the early 2000s when I moved out, a lot of friends in the entertainment comedy space, and it was pretty honest statement to say that you could stand out just by liking football. And so our house was the house that had 4 TVs stacked on top of each other, so we could watch all the games. And it just become like that was kind of the central point of the hang. And so, I think, I don't know if the football fandom drove that or the other way around, but, the other side of it, too, is it is a perfect gambling sport. You don't have to worry about watching games all day, every day, like basketball or baseball or some of these other sports. There's something beautiful about sitting down on a Sunday watching football for 8 hours and being done with it.
Yeah, I would say the West Coast thing is always just weird to me because I can't imagine watching a football game at 10 a.m. I don't know if my eyes would be up. I don't know if my brain would be up at this point. And
You,
then what I like about Sunday Night Football is by the time Sunday Night Football ends, my night is over. I'm going to bed at that point, right? It's me getting ready. If my Sunday Night Football ended at like 8:30, I don't know what I would do next.
So yeah, you know what? When I first moved out, I definitely had that like, man, this I'm young, I'm out partying, like it sucks to get up early. But as I've gotten older, I love it. I'm now the guy that gets to the office at 6 a.m. I'm like prepping what I'm gonna do. And honestly, like if you just watch the early games, you're done with football at like 1:30, and you can actually go do stuff. If you
That's
really,
all.
if you weren't a full blown degenerate like me and you're gonna sit on the couch and watch games all day, you could actually do stuff. And honestly, like for us as a show, we're able to go live after the game, and it's like 8:30, 9 o'clock, and so again, not working to the wee hours of the morning.
Sure, sure, and that's fair. So I'm with you there. I think at this stage of my life, being obviously in my late 30s, that wouldn't be the worst idea to get my day over with at that time either. So I see where you're coming from on that one. So how I mean, the Super Bowl happens, right? The second Super Bowl happens in our time, I would say. Obviously, the fourth one, that one happens. Everyone's on cloud nine, right? Because you got to be on cloud nine, and then the clouds just start muddying up, and it's just nonstop rain for like a decade. What was that like between where we're coming off this Super Bowl high and not really being kind of meaningful again till that spot check in 2016, and then being back again now? So where you could say in the span of 12, 13 years, you had two playoff appearances, one win. What was that whole losing decade plus like as a fan?
It's tough. I've kind of lived publicly too, doing the show since 2011. It's been a lot of years of me being a fan and being optimistic and
This is
wanting
true.
things to look good and just being a complete fool. So yeah, I mean, obviously the Super Bowl was great. I definitely think at that point I wasn't sitting here thinking that was going to be the last glory I'd see for some time. But after going through it, and it's been horrible, right? Like we've had some horrible coaches, we've had some
Well,
horrible situations, and frankly, it's the worst. It's been the worst team to root for because you knew it was coming in the back in your heart with Dave Gettleman, but yet you still wanted to root for the team because that's how you were programmed. But yeah, I think just it's made this what's happening now pretty cool. There's a certain bit of redemption kind of narrative within the team itself. There's a cool narrative where how the new staff actually looked within and saw all this value on it with players they didn't bring in and they didn't draft themselves, and those are the players that are actually kind of bringing this team to fruition. So makes you wonder, like, team building maybe wasn't that far off. It was more about the coaching. And so it's been really, really cool to watch this team. And as someone who runs a company and leads people, it's also very cool to see football coaches and leadership kind of take on the same approach of like, unity and goodness can happen in a friendly environment. It doesn't have to all be gritty and tough. And so, yeah, I mean, so far it's working, right? Like winning cures all. So maybe I'll have a different opinion 12 months from now, but it's certainly been exciting just to have optimism, right?
yeah,
10 years.
absolutely. It's just such a long drought of even fun. Like you said, forget the winning; it just wasn't fun either. On top of that, and now, I think everyone has expectations again. There's hope again. So of course, everything will probably go wrong. Being the fan that I am, hoping not. But what are you feeling about how this summer or off season has went? I should even say summer. Tell me your thoughts on the off season between the draft, the free agency, and where do you think this is all headed in your opinion? What's your vision of their vision?
I guess it's one of those things you often have to just assume they know what they're doing. Like, okay, they seem to be ticking the right boxes for the most part. Like, Mark Lewinsky kind of stands out as the one sore thumb so far, but why not be optimistic and why not think like, yeah, like what they're also following what they're saying. Like they want to build around responsible cap decisions and they want to invest in their own players because you know how those players work and you have already gotten to see what they're like. And so I think it's cool to see when someone says one thing and actually backs it up with actions. And I think based on what the coaching staff showed us last year, it's exciting to get some of these player types that we haven't had before, like the speed guys, like Okereke, a linebacker who, like been yearning for a guy since Antonio Pierce. Just give me
Yep.
a linebacker that can diagnose anything. And so, and even just like seeing how Deontay Banks is kind of coming around and kind of investing in premium positions the right way, it's exciting because when you really look at this roster and where the investment's taking place, if things do fall the right way, boy, they're really set up in a nice way for a long time.
And that's what I ideally want, right? Just longevity and consistency. I don't want the whole you won 1 year and now you're crap for five, and look, you got another winning season here and two, and then you're crap for four. Like, give me some level of longevity here, so I don't hate life every day. Um, I'm gonna go ahead and ask this question that Ryan brought in, because again, this is about sorry, Darius brought in for Ryan, because again, this part of this is: have you met any Giants legends between what you do and just being a child? Have you actually run into or interacted with anybody?
Yeah, so been pretty fortunate. Gotten to have a couple conversations with Brandon Jacobs on the show.
Nice.
Always kind of stands out as a guy who, if I was listing the guys that I would love to hang out with from those Super Bowl teams, he was one of them. And it's funny because what was fun about me getting to talk to him is I got to ask him the question about that famed playoff game where he took the football and just threw it as hard as he could against the scoreboard.
Cowboys
And
game. Yep.
he did verify that he was indeed trying to break something in that stadium. So that was cool. And then our business dealings has taken us to some pretty cool places, and we have a partnership with the Win, and we were out there for the draft last year since it was out in Vegas. We were kind of hanging out. We had done a show. We were then hanging out in the green room while Chris Long and his crew were doing their live draft stream, and David Tyree was one of the guests. So
Nice.
got to spend a little time with David Tyree in the green room, and obviously Giants legend for kind of a funny reason, but
Sure.
always cool to meet David Tyree.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we have this scenario here, and so you can maybe give me some gambling insight here on this, right? You do the draft. Giants got Banks, JMS, Hyatt in their first three picks, right? What what were the gambling odds that they would have gotten a JMS? Like, what would you have bet that JMS would have been picked up in the top of the second, or that Hyatt would have been their pick in the third round, even with the trade up? Obviously, that changes some of the variable there, but what would have been some of the odds here? Help bring us into your world a little bit.
I think Deontay Banks was a decent shot to go where he went. I think so whatever you may have been seeing in mock drafts with him being a second rounder, I think it was pretty locked in that he was going to be a first rounder. And I think even going to the Giants, a lot of people seemed to be dialed into the idea that they were going to draft a cornerback. I believe I gave them Joey Porter Jr., but the idea of it being Banks or Joey Porter Jr. or the kid out of Ole Miss who went to the Commanders,
Yep.
it seemed like that was going to be the first round choice. Now, as far as the rest, it was like the Giants fan wish list. I know I saw some mocks that had something similar, but at the end of the day, they were three guys being mocked in the first round at some point in the process. I know JMS had a draft pick total that was much closer to the top of the second round than the bottom of the second round. So again, seemingly they got some great value there. And then Jalen Hyatt was the guy that kind of fell out of favor for whatever reason. He was projected by the odds to go in the second round,
Yeah.
the mid-second round. And so for the Giants to have gotten him in the second round would have been a great pick per the odds. And so for him to make it all the way back to where they had to trade up and go get him, great on them. Again, trying to get that speed. Obviously, I think he probably will not contribute as much as his training camp highlights and hype.
Sure.
But boy, again, it's fun to see that we have all of this speed running around the field. And when you think about 12 months ago, like Isaiah Hodgins was out there and balling full time because we had to have him out there. Richie James, not exactly like a freak athlete, was out there balling all the time because he had to. So very excited to see a little bit of this electricity.
Yeah, I think they'll bring Hyatt slow. When I say slow, I mean not an every down guy, but a sub package guy who they're gonna just kind of let fly or just destroy what a defense looks like by making sure he's in a position where everyone keeps saying, "Oh well, what about the press? What about?" move him. Fine. You don't want to deal with the process. Put him in motion. What's the big deal here? Let him fly.
Yeah.
Who cares how he gets free? Just get the guy free and open, right? The rest to me is irrelevant.
Yeah, give me a gadget play where someone that's not the quarterback throws a deep pass because like give me a weird like reverse to Paris Campbell where he lets it rip.
You know what? Paris Campbell might be that guy. He comes out of the backfield. He can do those things.
Yeah.
Paris Campbell might be the version of Kadarius Toney people wish they got. That gadget player who's like a permanent slot who could defeat you.
Hoping for it. I mean, honestly, and you think about like I'm a guy who really loves just getting all caught up in the training camp highlights.
Sure.
And I'm thinking about all these potentials and like, man, Rob Wandell's going to come back later in the year. Like he was really coming in to being a number one option in the offense. And then I watched Sterling Shepard just absolutely abuse Trey Hawkins or someone, and it's like, oh man, like where are they putting all these guys? Because it does seem like Cole Beasley's making the team, and then around him, it's a whole bunch of guys that can really move.
Yeah, that video where Shep just destroys Hawkins is it's pretty filthy with that move too. I was just like, oh man, that's terrible for Hawkins, but great at the same time because he gets to learn. You know, it's a great learning curve. We're out of that draft. Did you have a favorite pick, and did you have this guy's on the board? Will you please pick him up? And they didn't pick him.
Oh, it was JMS. For me, I wanted the Giants to. When if you look around the league, the teams that have a great center are good. And I know it's not a position of value because it's a onesie position.
Sure.
But it still is one of those positions. Like think about when the Giants have been good. They've had a great center, and O'Hara was the last one. It's a position that requires stability and intelligence and some things that they haven't had of late, honestly. And while it was sad to see Nick Gates go, I think this was the right move. I mean, they drafted an older rookie, which was a little outside of their typical framework, but that's a position where I'm completely okay with an older guy because guess what? I want him to be smart. I want him to be able to drop in there right away. And I love the fact that he's got the wrestling background, and you see it. He gets his hands on guys, and he's locked in. So, he's getting good work in training camp going against Dex and Leo. I'm excited for him.
And all things considered, if it goes well, even at his age, he'll still get a second contract. You'll still get at least 2 contracts out of him. And in the NFL, that's the big thing, right? Do you get a guy on the second contract for another 3 to 4 years? And that's really where the hits are. Whereas we have very little people obviously the Shane era of second contracts. It just wasn't happening. I think it was just Shep. I think Shep might have been one of the only people to get a second contract. So JMS was your guy. Who's your sleeper in this draft class? Out of the people they picked, is there a guy you go, you know what? He's probably going to make a little bit more noise than people expect. And that was before the training camp, right? Before the Trey Hawkins had all this. When it happened, who was the guy?
I think it was Jalen Hyatt, even though Jalen Hyatt's getting hype, and I think third-round pick and all of that. I think the reason he's going to be the guy that like outperforms his draft position is simply because he's going to get schemed up and score touchdowns. Like he might not play a ton of percentage of the snaps, but he's going to score like 5 or 6 touchdowns, and they're all going to be electric plays that make highlight reels. And he's gonna be one of those guys that changes the defense when he's on the field. So I think while he might not be this kind of electric every down pass catcher who's going to be running the crispest routes and dominating defensive backs on a down in down out basis, I do think when he is deployed, it's good. I mean, Kafka and Dable have been so. Think about who they were playing, the toys they had last year. Now they have these toys. I firmly believe there's going to be some real fun stuff they do with this kid, and I think for that reason, he's the obvious choice. I think it would be really difficult for any of the other folks to really come in and do more than score, say, like 5 or 6 touchdowns. You know what I mean? Unless Deontay Banks is like Sauce Gardner and it's like Defensive Player of the Year, one of the best corners right away, which it seems like that's less likely. I think it is Hyatt.
Okay, fair enough. I also think Eric Gray can potentially make some noise. I really like him as RB too. Like I'm a fan. Plus, it's looking like he's on track for returns. Whether that be punt or kickoffs. Do you have a comp for Jalen Hyatt? Is there a guy that you envision say, you know what, I kind of see this for him?
Oh, Deshaun Jackson. That's if you're an optimistic Giants fan, it's got to be Deshaun Jackson. He's really the only guy that comes to mind who played with a slender frame and relied on speed and was able to do it for a long time. And when I think about, the horrible things he did to us as Giants fans, it would
Right.
be really nice to have a guy like that. A guy that was just, he's slippery, he's fast, he can change the game. I mean, I still think back to like 2014 when Odell was running those slants to the house, and that's the kind of stuff we haven't really had, that kind of electricity. So to have multiple levels of electricity and Hyatt being the real take the top off the defense, hopefully it's Deshaun Jackson and not Tutu Atwell.
Yeah, fair enough. Deshaun Jackson's always a name that comes to my mind, and then another name would be like a Will Fuller, obviously without the injuries, right? Because another guy with a lot of speed who can make a lot of downfield plays, maybe even a smaller version of a Sammy Watkins later on, not early on, but a smaller version. But yeah, I'm with you. If he can become that guy, then oh man, it opens up so much. Speaking of opening up, give me your thoughts on when the Darren Waller trade took place. What were your thoughts initially? What are your thoughts now?
So yeah, it was actually pretty cool. We're so spending a decent amount of time in Vegas. We had kind of heard through the grapevine that he was unhappy last year, and that he actually worked. We kind of were coworkers for a while on the same podcast network, and it was made known that he was unhappy with the situation. And it sounded like the reason he fired his agent last year was because the deal didn't get done last year. And so when you look at it finally happening, I think it made a lot of sense. The fact that it was the Giants that were the team that were able to go out, and like Joe Shane said, they felt like they needed an alpha pass catcher, didn't necessarily need to be a receiver. And with the supply that was out there and what they had, I don't know if you could have done much better in terms of an upside move. Obviously, everyone's going to throw out the idea that there's injury concerns because he's had some injuries.
Sure.
But again, if you listen to what some people are saying about last year, I wonder how much of that was him being injured, slow to return, or some sort of disagreement between the coach and the players. Just like with we saw with Derek Carr being sent home or going home or whatever happened, seems like maybe a little toxic. So yeah, I mean, I've heard nothing but great things about this guy too. He's an absolute, locker room guy. He's a stud, and boy, it's amazing to see how large he is compared to some of these big receivers we have. So, my initial thought to answer your question was, wow, this is something we have not had ever.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring up how large he is. I went to training camp a couple of times. I was like, yeah, Darren Wall is large, but man, unless you've seen him in person, it's kind of hard to describe how actually large this guy is. So they're in the huddle, and I was like, I'm looking right at Darren Waller, and he's almost dwarfing people around him. Like he doesn't make Evan Neal seem big, and that's weird because Evan Neal's a monster, right? So that's how large he is that he sticks out. That I was like, he is really just that large. And yeah, you're right. When's the last time you had a 6'6", 250 guy that was like a predominant pass catcher? And with him, I'm hoping now in these 12 personnel sets, Bellinger gets to have himself a nice little year, whether he stays in blocks and whether he chips out or whatever it is. But there's a lot of excitement from that. Tell me a little bit about how you felt about last year's class. So last year was Joe Shane's first class. What did you think about the picks? Obviously, they had a lot of them. What did you think about the picks at the time, and how do you feel like they've panned out so far?
I mean, I think it's unfortunate, but there have been some injuries. The big story to me though is like, would like to see a little bit more juice out of Kayvon, and obviously we need Evan Neal to take a step forward. But when you look through the rest of the class, it's you can be optimistic because some of the guys we haven't seen a ton from, but like the rookies are tough. I like that they got bullets. So going through it, I know everyone's stoked about Beavers. McFadden is meh to me. Dane Belton's exciting. The fumble was fun in training camp the other day. I do think he's probably one of the guys who I have the most faith is going to be a long-term contributor with this team. Obviously, Bellinger, I love. Bellinger is one of those guys. One of the bets we love to take is first touchdown in a game, and I always like to look at a backup tight end because there's just tons of value there, and I think Bellinger is going to be on the field all the time around the red zone. So love that pick. Again, Flott, I get why some people are in on him. I guess I have to see it. He's got to beat out Darnay Holmes because again, Darnay Holmes is the ultimate benchmark of someone who we probably shouldn't have Darnay Holmes on the team, but he's playing well enough to be on the team, and that's a sign that maybe Flott's not ready. Azudu, I hope, is starting or in the rotation. I feel like the best version of this team means he's reaching his potential, or at least starting to move toward in that direction. And based on what I saw last year from Wendell, I love what I saw, because again, it's kind of that short space gadgety stuff that Kafka and Dable are geniuses at. So I would say I give high marks, because he stuck to a framework. He stuck to a type. For the most part, he was going after younger guys. For the most part, he was going after athleticism profiles. And we've now seen over a decent sample size in the NFL that, in general, if you lean into these types of thing and marry it to like good character guys, you're going to hit more than not. But at the end of the day, it's the draft. It's really just about having as many bullets as possible, because there's a certain hit rate you're going to get, and
Sure.
hopefully we hit on the right players. I think that's the big one. Hopefully we hit on some of these offensive linemen like Neal and Azudu,
Yeah,
because I think that it's harder to not come back from that.
sure. And you brought up a name that continues to befuddle me, and that's my guy Durag Darnay. Now, I don't understand why he's playing. I guess I'm with you. I'm having a hard time understanding why Flott's not getting his reps. Now, from the last thing I read, is Flott's playing exclusively outside with the second team. So he's not playing in the slot anyway. They got him playing outside, which is fine. I actually like him as a future outside cornerback, because he's got excellent read and react skills, and he's not afraid to go in for a tackle. So I like that aspect of it. But man, I can't take another year of Darnay. I don't understand. I mean, he's like the ultimate hit or miss player. He either makes a play or he doesn't. Everything else is either a flag or a hold. I was bored the other day, and I was like, I want to watch some Giants football. So I put on the Commanders Giants game where Kayvon had the big game.
Yeah, love that game.
First drive for Washington, who gets a holding flag? Darnay Holmes. And I was like, you got to be kidding me, man. Even my memory bank goes back to that. So I'm with you. I don't know. He's on the last year of a contract. Fine. I can see understanding having a body and experience and saying, all right, cool. You're riding this one out anyway. We'll keep you on the 53. But starting, that concerns me. I don't want to see him starting. I'd rather see Flott. Man, I'd rather see them do what they're, apparently talking about. Trey Hawkins becomes your other outside guy, and then now Adoree moving. It's anybody but Durag, man.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're right. Like sometimes, like he does make a play or two, which he makes. His plays that he makes are always nice hits. Nice, he coming down in the running game, or like just sticking his nose in there. The bad plays are always in the passing game, and
Yep.
like they always hurt more. Like you said, the holdings, the complete blown coverages. Like he's a guy that if you watch a lot of tape, like he'll reach and grab and
He's
completely miss and
grabby.
just get
He's
get
very
destroyed,
grabby.
exactly, and get destroyed in an option route or something. So yeah, honestly though, it's either they're playing games again, like we found out after the fact they were playing last year in training camp, or these guys just aren't, they can't trust him yet. And if
Yeah.
they can't trust him yet, that, to your point, that's concerning, because I know Darnay was one of those guys a lot of people circled as a cut candidate, because he got one of those escalators for playing time, and
Sure.
he's making like $2.5 million or something. So yeah, I mean, I think we're aligned. I hope he's not starting. I don't mind him being on the team, but I really don't want him to be the starter.
Yeah, no, I definitely want Flott taking snaps, man. Flott made plays. He's
Yeah.
healthy. He's quicker. Way better in coverage. Is the game? The name of the game is coverage, right? So he's way better in coverage. So we'll see what happens. Darius wants to know, who does Ryan think will have a breakout year this year? Who's the breakout candidate?
Uh, I mean, you can't even consider Darius Slayton to have a breakout, because he's been our leading receiver for year after year after year. I think it's one of the safeties. I think it's Pinnock or Belton. I think we're gonna look back on this year, and we're gonna say, wow, we have a really 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 nice set of, and maybe even a trio. We've some of our best teams. We've had a nice trio of safeties that will allow the defense to truly get versatile in a way that Wink wants to. So Pinnock with the interception in the preseason game. Belton had that exciting fumble in training camp. I'll go with one of the safeties. I like the idea of getting back to a defense that maybe creates opportunities from time to time.
No, I love that answer. I think those are both really, really good answers. Pinnock has just been unbelievable from camp on forward, even in games. This guy's just making plays. I love Pinnock actually as a safety blitzer. He's really, really good at getting to the quarterback. And even if you went back to that Lions game, that turnover was Pinnock, part of Pinnock getting in there, and Tamon Fox as well. So yeah, the safety group. I even tweeted this the other day that I think is going to be a very underrated safety group in the league between Pinnock, Belt, and McKinney. Because like you, I'm expecting a lot of 3 safety looks when those sub packages come on.
Yeah, no, and I think what you nailed it with Pinnock. He has that kind of knack. Some guys just have a knack on timing and which lane to kind of guess. And he's a good blitzer, and again, like that's something that Wink will reward. And he's the kind of guy that I think like game changing play, gets through blindside hit, fumble, return for touchdown type play. Hopefully, it's in a big moment in the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely, and that then will help quell some of the coverage as well if you can obviously add some duress to the other team. So they added a lot of speed. That was the focus, was speed, offense speed, defense speed. Like you said, Okereke is a guy that I was a huge fan of in college. I wanted them to draft him when he was available because for me, he was, like I said, a complete sideline to sideline guy. Haven't had since Pierce. We're talking now like a dozen years. We can say we haven't had a legit linebacker mainstay. And yeah, I'm a big fan of Beavers. I mean, if he's healthy, he's already ILB2 to me. I know Wink said that McFadden's leading it. That's interesting. I'm not against it. I'm going to trust the coaching staff, like you said, right? If they're putting the player there, we have
Yeah.
to assume right now. It's only year 2 so far. They've earned it in year 1. Let's see how it goes in year 2 because what have you done for me lately type scenario. But McFadden was the only guy out of their rookie class that never got hurt. Literally, all 10 other draft picks got hurt, either significantly or for periods where it affected them. Um, when you look at this team and you have an Aziz and you have a Thibodeau, what is your expectation for that duo going forward?
I mean, Aziz is simply whenever he's out there. Last year when he was out there, it was just a difference maker, and I don't think enough has been said of how different the team was able to look. And so I'm excited if he can stay healthy. Some of the stuff I've read or I've heard him talk about how he changed his workout style, changed his diet. Like it seems like he's fully committed to whatever was wrong before getting it right. Because again, when he was out there, he is a difference maker. And when you put him next to Dexter and Leonard Williams, and you also have Kayvon on the other side, who, by the way, another thing I'm not hearing a lot is that like, Kayvon missed a lot of time in the preseason with that cheap shot from Thaddeus Moss. And I think I just like that's those sometimes those preseason Z's with the calf, right? Like sometimes those preseason things can linger into the season and really kind of drag out and cause you to just have a bad year that gets you off on the wrong foot. So I'm excited to see both of these guys hopefully come into the season healthy because you look around the division and everyone has a stout defensive line, and to sit here and have the ammunition on the Giants line to even suggest that it's one of the it's competitive with all these great defensive lines is a great place to be. Now I think for us it's all about those edge rushers. If the edge rushers show up this year and Kayvon and Aziz are meeting at the quarterback, boy, we might be having some little deja vu back to the old Spags NASCAR packages.
Yeah, a little bit of the glory days, which would be excellent because they really beefed up this D line, right? They brought in Nacho, Ashawn. These are Super Bowl winning D tackles who, when now if Leonard Williams or Dexter North leaves a break, you feel like there shouldn't be a significant drop off on the next play. Whereas when those two left the field last season, it was just open season against the Giants.
Yeah.
Plus the addition of Okereke, right? So now speeds, stops, hoping to make that change right there. What about the defense gives you concern today? What about the offense gives you concern today?
A defense, it's simply like Wink has had some trouble stopping the run for a couple of years now, not just at the Giants. Is it a schematical issue, or did we just not have the tools? So I know that in theory, signing Ashawn and Nacho helps reinforce this defensive front so that Dexter and Leonard can get some rest. But that I need to see that, and same with the linebackers, right? I need to see it all kind of come together and work. And if they can show that they can, be gap disciplined and actually stop a running game, a basic running game. We're going to see it week 1 with the Cowboys. I think they're going to throw it at us, and so I think that will be the first test. And then on the offensive side, it's one man. It's Evan Neal. I think the way this coaching staff showed they can scheme stuff up gives me great confidence that they will be fine with the speed they brought in with the second year of Daniel Jones in the system. Who, by the way, we didn't get to it earlier, but when I see Daniel Jones standing next to Darren Waller, it really gives me some pause of how insanely big he is. But yeah, all of the things around him give me confidence. It's purely like the combination of like the gaps in the line. Like, is Evan Neal going to be fine? Because if Evan Neal's like he was last year, they're going to have problems again. I guess I can include the rest of the offensive line in there, but really it's just Evan Neal. I think if Evan Neal can be if Evan Neal can go from horrible to league average in his second year, I think this team will be. I have more faith that JMS gets it done at center right now than I do with Evan Neal. I still need to see it with Evan Neal. I hate that he got that concussion. He's the one guy that needs these reps. So yeah, that's the man, Evan Neal. If it sucks that our season's hinged on Evan Neal, but at least he seems to be a hard worker who's trying to get it right.
Yeah, sure. And Evan Neal did clear concussion protocol today, and he did practice, but apparently he had to get his ankle taped up. So maybe a sprain. We'll see how bad it is tomorrow. But like you said, the most important thing is he could use some reps. I don't know if he's going to get in on Friday or not, considering tomorrow's Thursday, especially if the tape up was something significant. I don't know if you want to rush him back when he's just coming off a concussion. So we'll see if he plays any reps or not. Otherwise, you would assume he's going to get at least a couple of drives in the last or the third preseason game at this point. A lot hinging on Evan Neal from a lot of people. He seems to be that cog, whether he's going to drive that machine or not. So tell me this now. Were you always on the Daniel Jones support wagon, or were you like, WTF, get this guy off my team, he sucks? Where were you in this whole, what year is it now? It's been like 6 years. Where were you during this Daniel Jones train ride?
Never wavered. When the initial draft pick happened, it was like, all right, let me look into this. Size, speed, like there's something here. But dang, he's goofy and stupid, looking just like Eli. Like, this is horrible. And then year one, it's like, oh my God, that Tampa game. Like, this guy has all the weapons. Like, he's gonna be the future. And then, I've gone from calling him Danny Dimes to Daniel Jones to Dan Jones to Vanilla Vic. We've had a lot of names in our relationship, but I've never wavered. And now that we've seen him with proper coaching and nourishment, I feel good about it, because at the end of the day, like, when you hear the way the players talk about him, I know sometimes that can be BS, but these guys are like Darius Slayton. There's no reason why Darius Slayton has to go out there and be this like stand for Dan Jones on social media, and yet he does. And there's no reason these guys have to be like, you guys don't understand how hard that he works. Those are the kind of statements that make me think like, oh, this is great, because maybe now we have someone who's thinking about football in the right way and putting him in the situations he should be in. So I'm very excited for year two. I've always been in on him. Like I said, I've had all these names for him. This year we're just going with DJ because that's what his teammates call him.
Sure. Do you think this year is his opportunity to finally shut up a lot of media, I would say? Not so much fans, because I don't know how much athletes would really care about what fans think to that extent where it affects their work life, but at least the media narrative that he's meh.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I'm putting a decent amount of money on him to win the MVP, because I think when you look at that award,
MVP.
When you can run the ball, and let's just say he rushes for 700, 800 yards and 10 touchdowns, whatever else he does with his arm, great. Like, if this team's doing well, he's in New York. People were kind of out on him. They're going to love the redemption story. The media will immediately get in on him once he's good. It's a great story. He came up with all this adversity. He overcame. And so, yeah, I think absolutely. I think there will be some haters forever, because he's going to probably still have games where it just doesn't look all the way there. But I like where he's at. I like where the team's at. I like what people are saying about it. And quite frankly, just anecdotally watching the tape, it seems like there's more zip on the ball this year.
I just think the boy finally got some confidence back, and that makes obviously a huge difference. But like you said, there's always going to be people. Just let's remember, people wanted to ship Eli out even after he won the Super Bowl. Like, this guy's garbage. You got lucky. These were fans saying these things, and I was like, man, I don't know how to even respond to that. Like, that's how ridiculous it can be. So For the fans that just don't like you or don't want you, I don't think there's anything you can do to kind of change that. But for the guys who are kind of on the fence, who are like, hey, you know what, I was wrong, they can make that adjustment. This is a good year for that kind of scenario. But there's people on, like, I interact with Twitter or see all the time that just, why is he still on the team? Where are you? You should be more concerned about winning than the individual. Like, there's players I don't like. I will always bring up O'Shane Zimenez. He sucks. I don't know why he's on the team. He's so bad. I say this every week, so it's probably repetitive, but if you were drafted to be a pass rush specialist and you cannot get to the quarterback ever, why are you still here in year 5? I don't even know why they re-signed him other than cheap depth, because there's no third pass rusher. And he's at least acclimated, so they're like, sure, why not? It's cheap, bring him back. But I'm not going to root against him. Like, he's on the team. Like, I want to win. Like, yeah, go be the best version of bad that you are, but just, be a little bit better at it. So it's kind of that scenario that even if you don't like Daniel Jones, how do you root against your team? Never really understood that. Again, unless he had criminal charges and you were just like, hey, listen, this guy's a real bad person, that's different. I see no reason why you would ever root against the Giants in any form. It's an oddity that definitely does exist, and I'm sure you see it all over the place.
Yeah, look, I think it's just the cynical fan, right? The New Yorkers, Northeasterners in general, kind of are given credit for being that cynical fan, and I think it's easy. If you really break down the psychology of a fan, there's two types. There's the kind that just loving the team, and there's the kind that love hating something and complaining about something, and it's never good enough. And so, yeah, Daniel Jones, very easy target. Very easy target. He just looks goofy. He looks stupid. He's made bad plays that are just he tripped on a football. He's a professional who tripped running with no one around him. That will forever keep people hating on him and thinking he's not an athlete. And so I guess the haters can hate, but this is a massive redemption year for him, and I think he's in a position where I don't know if there's too many quarterbacks outside of maybe Mahomes with a higher ceiling this year.
Interesting. Ryan's got some takes. Let me put
Hot
this
take.
one.
Hot take.
That's a hot one. Higher ceiling is just Mahomes. I like this. Okay. That's a great one, man. I mean, hey, listen, you're standing by your takes, and I love that, right? You just got to own it. So, yeah, he's got the money. They brought in Waller specifically for him to have a target, that worst-case scenario. And even if Evan Neal doesn't pan out, hey, too bad, figure it out. Step up, move around him. Keep Daniel Bellinger in 12 personnel to help a little bit more if that's the case. But they've brought enough weapons for him to be able to get rid of the ball quick with the speed. Between a Slayton, a Hyatt, a Paris Campbell, Saquon, still, all these pieces. He's got to figure it out this year. This is his chance to really either buy in or set things on fire. Those are really just the two. I don't think there's going to be a middle ground here. But for your MVP thing, I think they have to win at least 11 games for that conversation. Anything below that, I don't think it's going to happen. Because if you look at Eli's 2011, when he had all those fourth quarter touchdowns, I think he broke or tied Peyton Manning's record. They were only 9-7, but that one, he had a legit argument to be in the conversation for MVP in that year. But because they only won 9 games in a wild card team that snuck in, that definitely does affect you. So in the same sense, I think if they win like 9 or 10 games, I don't know if his numbers will just be enough unless they're astronomically great.
Yeah, I think that path comes with like a ceiling where maybe the Eagles and Cowboys trip up a little bit. They win the division, like you said, 11 or 12, probably 12 wins needed. And I think it really is going to come with like an eye-opening performance on the ground. I think it's going to come with leading. Fun fact: there were only two quarterbacks who had more carries inside the 5-yard line than Daniel Jones last year, and they were Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen, and it wasn't by much. So I really think that, and quite frankly, he was in the top 15 of all players, and so. The idea that he scores 10 rushing touchdowns is part of this. They improve with the passing game, obviously. He gets to maybe like 25. But if he scores or maybe it's 30, so he gets to 40 total touchdowns, but a ton of rushing yards. Look, some stuff has to happen, but if they win the division, the media might help take care of the rest.
Sure. I mean, Jalen Hurts was in the MVP conversation. He had 22 throwing touchdowns, and I think his total was 28, 29, something like that.
Yeah. Exactly.
So, I mean, you're on the mark there if that gets you the conversation. They're in the conversation because of all the wins, right? I mean, it's the wins that helps propel that, and you are the propeller or part of it. So definitely hoping for that. Any thoughts on the whole Saquon thing this year versus next year? How did you feel about it? How do you feel right now? And what do you do with it next year?
It's a bummer because Saquon's an electric player you want to root for, and it would suck
Yeah,
if he isn't on the team. But as a fan of the Giants, you can't be upset with the way that it was handled by the front office. They handled it perfectly. I don't think the previous front offices would have handled it this way. I think ownership would have meddled. And frankly, like look what's happening. It sucks, but the running backs just aren't that valuable. And I think we'll be looking at a situation hopefully where Saquon changes representation. Maybe they can get a little bit more reasonable when it comes to a deal, and we can lock him up in a way where he's going to be around, because certainly he needs some new representation that will explain to him that playing in New York is maybe a little bit better than playing in one of these other cities. So I like Saquon the player. I was hoping they wouldn't pay him big dollars. I thought that like the 3-year deal that was rumored to be offered to him would have been great, because it wouldn't have crushed the Giants and it would have given him a little bit of stability. But now that he's on the tag, guess what? Contract year. Let's hopefully take advantage of as a team and turn it into wins, because he still is one of the best running backs in the league.
yeah, absolutely. And I hope he continues to be healthy, gets back into shape and form. He had his year last year was close to his rookie year. He was putting up those kind of numbers, and you don't succeed without him in what he's doing. And everyone is not replaceable at every position. So to your point, at least with Barkley and the old regime, Dave Gettleman would have made him the highest paid running back. And you give me the gambling odds there, I'm putting money on that one. All right, Dave Gettleman would have 100% made sure he beat McCaffrey's deal and would have been the highest paid something, guaranteed. So we're all glad that didn't happen, and that guy's not around to make that decision. Um, when you since you're on the West Coast, do you get to go to any actual Giants games?
I'll be out in Vegas this year for
I'm
their
about to say
game
they're
against
playing
the
the
Raiders.
Raiders.
Yeah,
Like,
so
nice.
I try to, yeah, like when they're around now. Arizona, Vegas, both LA teams are all kind of in the range of where maybe the Bay, go up to see San Francisco, all in the range of areas I'd go to watch them. But honestly, as a gambler and just a fan, I also almost prefer the sitting on my couch with my 8 TVs. But yeah, I try to get in a game when they head west.
Okay. Favorite memory as a Giants fan up to today? And again, you can rattle off a couple, but what's the one that just comes to your mind immediately as a favorite memory?
The Lawrence Tynes kick in Green Bay when they beat Brett Favre. That
Nice.
bottom line, like that game, I can still remember standing in the corner of my house that I thought was good luck for the second kick, or for the third kick, or whatever it was, and just when that went through, it was just this, oh my goodness, this team actually went on a run. Like that was 2008, and that was amazing. That's the one kick that comes to mind.
What is the worst memory that sticks out?
Deshaun Jackson punt return.
Yeah. You just say the name and we know what you're talking about. Like when you say the
That,
name, every Giants fan knows exactly what you're talking about. They know exactly what the play is, where they were, and how that debacle even took place. So we're all there with you. That definitely makes one of the tops, and this is why everyone hates. And I always say his name. I hate you, Brad Wing. I hate you so much.
oh, you're no Matt Dodge. Matt
No, so
Dodge.
Brad Wing was
Yes.
he was
He was
actually,
another bad one though.
he was another bad one. Yes, like Matt Dodge, you piece of. You're probably a great guy though, so if you ever see this, it's not personal, but
Oh, I remember actually Coughlin just being like, Coughlin was not happy with him throughout
he was
most of the
ripping
season.
him. He was
But he
ripping
had
him.
some strong ass leg, and they were like,
Yeah.
oh, whatever. But then that play, like all he had to do was kick that out of bounds, and the game's
That's
over.
exactly what Coughlin
Unbelievable.
was screaming at him even after, like, what are you doing? Um, so yeah,
Horrible.
one of the worst. Tell us a little bit about where we can find you. Tell us a little bit about the business so people can actually tune in. Give them your spiel right here.
Yeah, so I mean, basically the pitch is if you bet on games, you should check us out. We're the Sports Gambling Podcast. We talk all sports, but we're really a football podcast. We pick every game. We have been since 2011. We do, if you're into DFS, fantasy, we cover that. If you're into college football, we cover that. Props, we do that too. So we'll be covering football from every angle. And if football is not your thing, Sports Gambling Podcast Network, we got a podcast feed for you. If you're into baseball, we got the MLB Gambling Podcast, the Golf Gambling Podcast, the MMA Gambling Podcast. So if you bet on a sport, we got you covered.
All right, perfect, man. Ryan, I appreciate you. I know you got a hard cutoff, so I want to make sure I respect that time. Appreciate you being here. I want to thank everybody else who was here just in the comments, hanging out with us, trying to get to know Ryan a little bit. And we'll definitely reconnect during the season. And if you end up going to one of those games, tell me what that experience was like and how it went for you.
Absolutely. We'll definitely have to talk after the season when Dan Jones has his MVP.
We do. We need to catch up, and you got to tell me what your bet was and what came back on it.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, man. Appreciate you. Have a good one. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Go Giants.